Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Now, for many people, a well-paid, high-flying career in a firm like Davies Stockbrokers will be considered to be a destination in life, a dream. It's what we tell our kids, this is the way you want to go. But not Roseanne Longmore, who went from being Chief Operating Officer at Davy Wealth Management to leading and starting her own startup based on babies who she felt weren't getting the proper attention for breast milk. Now, Roseanne, you're welcome to the podcast. It's been a really interesting journey for you so far, and I'm going to ask you about Coro and how it works in a minute. But first, you've had a very institutional path, a white-collar life, if you forgive me for putting it that way, for most of your career, haven't you?
Yes, that's correct. I kind of went through the traditional trajectory through university and then into finance, and so...
Yeah, and like for a lot of people in Ireland, that's the good life. That's the ultimate sort of middle class dream, enough to afford a nice living, enough to be able to have some of the good things, part of a system that might have your back, during tough times as well, because you're part of a company, you're part of an institutional ecosystem. So again, we're going to talk about Coro and breastfeeding technology in a moment, but did you have any hesitation or pause in leaving that relatively secure life?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the day comes for every entrepreneur where they're in existing employment or they're employed and, they're getting their paycheck at the end of the month. But when you have a business idea and an ambition, everyone has to make that call at some point, when to take the leap.
But many of us might have an inkling of an idea we think might, play in the market. But then we look at our pension, we look at our 25 days off a year. We look at, our pay packets. We look at the kids we're putting through school and college. It's a difficult thing. So what was it in you that made it possible for you to move from that really kind of secure, if I may call it so, life into a rather insecure one?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do something different. I wanted to change my career and I always knew I wanted to build a business. When I worked in wealth management, I was lucky enough to work with a lot of high net worth individuals, particularly people who had built their own businesses. And that was really fascinating to me. I was seeing these people and meeting them and through my work in finance, and it was always very fascinating to me. So absolutely between myself and my co-founders, we all had to make that decision. But I guess we had, insofar as possible, de-risked Coro as much as possible in terms of a business proposition before we left our jobs. So my co-founders and I were working on it really kind of 2 years in the background before we took the leap. So I think we would have de-risked it as much as possible. But
just getting an insight then in working with those in that wealth management world, maybe you were seeing an attitude, an approach to life, which was just go for it, was it? Invest money, build things.
Exactly. Look, there's always going to be a reason not to do it. So it's about kind of, de-risking it as much as possible, controlling what you can control, doing your homework, making sure the opportunity exists, making sure you are fairly confident that you would be funded. And then eventually you just have to go for it.
And we're going to talk about why Coro is important now in a moment, but in terms of that journey from being in that life to the startup, because it's been 7 years now.
Yes, yeah.
And the product itself is almost 10 years in development. How have you found that? Like, have you given anything up? Do you end up sleeping less at night?
Well, you give up money. And obviously like startup is 24/7 and you have the responsibility of, having staff and paying people's wages. So it's not just like from your own perspective, like it's one thing to take care of yourself, but you do have the responsibility of other people. And obviously there's the opportunity lost as well. Like, the statistics around how many startups actually fail. So, and then if, you're always looking down that barrel that if that happens, you might have to go back to the workforce.
Is there something you can't afford now that you might have been able to before? Like, are you staying somewhere local for a holiday, for example, whereas you might have gone abroad?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all entrepreneurs sacrifice financially, particularly in the early years. And yeah, like everybody, it's leaving that security. It's the security as well as, anything financial. But, if you're doing something you love and you're making a difference and your product or your service is going to make a real impact, especially globally, that's enough for most people to know that it's worth it.
You got a nice shout out early on from Richard Branson, didn't you?
Yes, so we were about 6 weeks into when we incorporated the company in 2017, and we did a pitch competition at the Dublin Tech Summit, and we won that competition, and that was a Virgin competition, and the prize was to meet Richard Branson in London. So yeah, that was a great start actually.
Did he not mention you in his book as well?
He did. He mentioned us in his book and his podcast. So obviously he's very keen innovator and keen to support, kind of disruptive technologies that have never existed, and particularly ones that will have a real societal impact. And with Coro Flow, obviously there is the potential there to enhance, infant and broader population health outcomes. So he took a real interest in it.
He's not the only one. I mean, at the opening of your office a few months ago, I bumped into Mary Harney, former Taoiseach, and her husband Brian. They're on your board, I think, are they?
Yes, Mary's on our board, yes.
Yeah, so so you've attracted an awful lot of interest. Now let's talk about Coro Flow itself, because it has been a fairly long road since you incorporated the company in 2017. Let's start with the basics. What is Coro Flow and what is the need for it?
Okay, so Coro Flow is the world's first breastfeeding monitor. So essentially it's a standard silicone nipple shield and with an embedded flow meter. So women wear these shields currently for other indications like skin protection. So they use Coro the same as they would a regular shield. And as they're feeding their baby, all of the data comes up on their phone in real time, exactly how much milk their baby's getting. So what we see is globally is that many women are initiating breastfeeding in very, very high numbers. And then when you look at the 6-month exclusive breastfeeding target, there's a huge drop off from the initiation rates to the 6-month target. And when you ask women, why are you stopping? They're concerned around low supply, whether they have low supply, if their baby's getting any milk or enough milk is one of the main reasons women are stopping. So what we want to do is, really try and increase breastfeeding rates using technology and to really help women achieve their own
measure that, or
to measure
around that.
Yeah.
So rather than just thinking that there may not be enough milk there,
exactly,
you have a little bit more.
Well, you've accurate data, so it's volume information in real time. So really to empower women to achieve their own breastfeeding goals using accurate information.
And in terms of building that device, what kind of challenges did you have in doing that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's been like a lot of challenges because essentially this product is going into a baby's mouth and there's nothing more critical than that. So really from a point, it was the material science alone around the materials, the components, that's all obviously has to be tested and rigorously. So it's been a very long road in that respect. And then obviously this technology has never been successfully completed before. So particularly work around the patents, like our...
Kind of an amazing.
Yeah.
We haven't had a device along these lines before from such a big industry.
Yeah.
For baby tech.
Yeah, so up until now, or for many years, the only method was weighing, pre and post feed weighing. And this is really, it can be very problematic outside of the clinical environment, in terms of its level of accuracy. So we have seen that many companies have been trying to reach the solution that we have been the first to achieve. So because the silicone shields are already on the market, the passive ones, and they're used for other indications, there really has been like a technology race to fit the microflow meter into the existing form, because these shields are as close to skin contact as possible, when you are introducing them. So, it's not for every mother. Obviously, for women who are breastfeeding naturally, they don't need this product if their baby's gaining weight and they're happy. What we're really looking to is the mothers who want to breastfeed and they're thinking about stopping or adding formula.
Worried.
Yeah, where they're worried and, where they're thinking about stopping breastfeeding because they don't have that information. So really they can use Coro as like a tool in their toolkit. It's of giving them accurate information information, just a snapshot in time.
Because that can be a very anxious and confusing time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for many mothers, and obviously they're tired, especially first-time mothers maybe if they've had a premature baby, or mothers who are combi feeding where they're breastfeeding and they are going to top up with formula, they might want to use it, to see how much to supplement with. But really the main cohort is women who have chosen to breastfeed, and they're not sure if their baby's getting any or enough milk, and they want that information.
So your co-founders, I think one of them is your cousin, an engineer. It's Jamie Travers, is it?
Yes.
And then there's Helen Barry, who's a doctor, medical doctor as well. And they, I think, had been working on this device since, I think, 2015.
Yeah, so it was their actual personal experience. Their first baby was only tiny, and Helen wanted to breastfeed, and the public health nurse was coming out with his weighing scales on the kitchen table. So Jamie had been working in the area of microflow sensing in another industry. So when he started to examine the patent art that existed, he could see that, the shield was the optimum solution. So really it was about getting that micro technology into that form, that existing form. And then obviously Helen, while Jamie was developing out that patent and the technology, Helen was looking at the academic and medical research field, like how it would be so impactful in terms of that wider academic body of knowledge. So yeah, at that point then I was working in finance, and between the three of us, we just thought we had the right skill set to develop the idea and bring it to market.
And where are we now with Coro? I mean, in terms of bringing it to market?
So we're launching at the end of this year through McCabe's and Macaulay's after 7 years of R&D. So just to your point, yeah, obviously there's just been a huge amount of testing requirements and rigour. And we also completed a clinical study. We were funded by the European Commission, 2.1 million to complete that clinical study. So we're now ready to go to market, and it's going to be in stores and available online from the end of this year, which is really exciting.
So in that period, in that 7 years, what have you found yourself doing mostly? I mean, you have investors, for example. Mm-hmm. You're trying to hire people as well. You're trying to keep everything on the road in terms of where people are, in terms of development of the product. 7 years, what have you found yourself doing most of that time?
Well, for me, really, it's to keep, as much noise away from the technology and engineering team as possible, and obviously just to keep money coming in. So up until the last few months, I was probably the only non-engineer, non-scientist on the team. So the core team are developing the technology. We've biomedical engineers, we've a head of software who is building the app, and then we have the clinical team who are, and it's being used in clinical environments. So for me, really, I guess the core of my work, it was to keep money coming in with investors, and then keeping our existing investors hopefully happy. Certainly, like every startup, everything takes longer.
So it was a combination of client engagement, your investors, but also a COO role in trying to manage everything in the company. If you were the only non-engineer or non-scientist on the team, you were effectively responsible for everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've
HR,
yeah, I did the VAT return, did the payroll, that's...
Organise the parties.
Exactly. Buy the coffee, pay the rent. So, yeah, I mean, I was my background in project management and finance, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. So it suited me right down to the ground. And I think when you're going in at a small business, we were 5 people for the first few years, that's basically, I had a very broad...
And if you were starting again, or if you were teleported back, is there anything you might have done slightly differently? Anything that would have been very helpful, or anything you might have tried to avoid?
I mean, when I think back, like most business people over the last few years, it's obviously things like COVID, there's things that are just huge challenges, but every business faced them. So, I don't know, for us, I feel like we've always had a really good team. Maybe we would have raised more, especially during our seed round, there was more money on the table. The round was oversubscribed. But, now when entrepreneurs say, look, you raise more, go quicker, go faster. But for us, with the hardware product in consumer, it's very different. Sometimes those rules, can't really be
Because
applied.
it's actually quite rare in Ireland to find a startup that's doing hardware and not just software.
Yeah, hardware is hard and it's expensive and it's capital intensive. So, I think we've moved as fast as we can, and in as safely as we can. As I said, this product has to be. It's all about its safety. It's going into a baby's mouth. So, yeah, I think we've built a really good team, and we've always been frugal and lean, and we just kind of approach our milestones one by one.
So how will McCabe's and other pharmacies sell it? Is it that I will walk in, or my partner, my wife might walk in, and it will be there on the shelf, or what will the model be there?
Yeah, so mothers and fathers, anybody can walk into a store in McCabe's in Dublin and Macaulay's in the rest of the country and pick it up and purchase it. So it's a very straightforward business model, and then we can sell it, like we'll be selling online on corobaby.com.
And have you arrived at a retail price yet?
So it's €299.
€299. And has there been any interest, or would you be hoping in the long term there'd be interest from more institutional bodies, HSE, others? Have they expressed any view one way or the other on this? Could this be something that might be incorporated into health programs?
Yes, we have a multiple partnerships, research partnerships in place with different research organisations. So, if you can imagine, they can look at the external factors that impact breastfeeding, genetic and or hormonal factors. Does that influence milk production? In the hospital environment as a customer, we haven't really looked at that yet. As I said, this is for very particular concerns with mothers. So, doctors typically think when used appropriately, it's going to be extremely helpful. But in terms of going to market, it really is the consumer market that is our priority. And
presumably, if you have a decent experience here as a proof, you can then maybe look at other markets, maybe.
Absolutely. And like Dr. Barry, our co-founder, and we've also got Ellen Ward as our new PhD baby nutritionist. She's our clinical lead, a lactation consultant and midwife. So they would really be working with those type of partners to see where best Coro could be used in those clinical settings.
What's your zinger of a line when you're trying to recruit people like that into the company? What is the thing that most effectively gets them over the line? Because I know you've a new head of growth as well.
Yeah, that this technology has never existed before. It's the first in the world. It's truly groundbreaking. It's truly innovative, and we're the first in the world to do it. So when people who are really keen to work on something novel and exciting and really is groundbreaking, that seems to do it for them.
And because some of them are moving from big companies as well, because we discussed in the first few minutes the idea of this stable, secure corporate life, very well paid, great benefits, great prospects. You're kind of on Happy Street, but they're moving to a small startup which is funded but is still on a somewhat uncertain journey.
Yeah, the people, I guess they want to work on something that's going to make an impact, and Coro really has the opportunity of revolutionising breastfeeding research and, enhancing global health population outcomes. So if they're, for engineers, they want to work on cool technology. When you're working for a small startup, you can get your hands into every, department. It's, you can work across the areas that interest you the most, and they're learning a lot, I guess, like we all are, because we're a small team exposed to each other every day. So, if you're working in software, you're going to be working with the hardware guys. They're listening to me fundraising, they're meeting investors. So it's really just a very exciting environment, and one that they can, a change from where they're coming from, where they're on very large teams just doing one type of work.
Have you found the community in Dublin or in Ireland useful, helpful, standoffish? How have you found the tech community here?
Oh, incredible. Yeah, we started down in Dogpatch Labs. That's like just a really, really brilliant community down there. And then when we had to build out our own lab, we moved to DCU Alpha. So there's a lot of kind of more mature companies out there, but also a lot of startups all working in kind of sensor and hardware. So no, Ireland is really incredible. Like we were funded by Enterprise Ireland in our seed round, and they've been huge backers of us. And again, it's definitely more coherent. Like I go to London a lot, to California, and it's pretty much each to their own. But whereas in Ireland, I think we really are privileged with a very, very tight community, particularly with other entrepreneurs, because people often ask, like, how did you know this? Like, how did you get that information? But I would literally just go out and ask every other entrepreneur or founder for a coffee, and they would say, do this, don't do that, don't make this mistake. Like people are incredibly generous with their information, and they'll share, the scars on their back with you so you can avoid those pitfalls.
We must do another podcast at some point about what those do's and don'ts are. But for the moment, Roseanne Longmore, thank you very much for coming in and explaining how the technology works, and we wish you all the very, very best. JJ Clark produced this episode, and Gav Hennessy was on sound. I'm Adrian Weckler, and you've been listening to or watching The Big Tech Show. We'll talk to you soon.